Hi and welcome. We're so happy you're joining us here today. Getting your data into one place, using your data to make operating decisions, and optimizing your inputs are the pillars of the FieldView platform. I'm Andrew Elgersma, and I'm a climate business manager in Western Ontario. Today, along with my colleague Troy Prasovsky, we're going to discuss using FieldView to make informed seed decisions for next season. Each season brings with it its own unique challenges and opportunities, and we want to show you how engaging in FieldView can help provide you with more powerful insights specific to your farm to propel your farm business forward. Our team is on standby to answer your questions live. Please use the chat feature on this site with any questions throughout this webinar. As a reminder, all previous webinars are housed on our climatefieldview.ca/webinars site, and you can view everything from setting up your virtual farm to finding value in harvest data live in the combine here and everything in between. So with that, I'm going to transition over to Troy, who's going to introduce our next guest speaker here today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks a lot for that, Andrew. My name is Troy Prasovsky. I'm also a climate business manager. Welcome and thanks for joining us again today. Today we've got a great topic for you. It's using FieldView and your data to make seed decisions. And Andrew and I discussed it, and we thought we'd bring in the professionals. So we've got a market development agronomist, Kate Hadley, with us, and she's going to help us out and let us know how she uses FieldView and how she helps her customers make those decisions. There's lots of things, lots of factors that go into making seed decisions. So today we're going to go through them. Kate, please tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us how long you've been in the industry, where you're from, and kind of what you do.
Thanks, Troy. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Hadley, and I'm a market development agronomist based out of Saskatoon. I'm originally from Southwest Ontario, and I do have experience working with both corn and soybeans in that area. I moved out to Western Canada about 7 years ago, and since then, I've jumped into working with canola and also with the cereal and pulse crops that we have out here. I currently work in the north and east of Saskatoon area, and we have quite a few canola trials out there in the droughty conditions this year.
Awesome. No, that's great, Kate. Let's hop into. I know you started you got a presentation going for us. Let's get into some slides and see how you're using data to make seed decisions.
Sounds good. So I'm going to kick things off. And I'd like everyone to take a moment to write down the top 3 factors that you consider when you're making a seed decision for next year, when you're choosing which hybrid or variety you're going to put into your fields. So now that you have your list, usually we're going to see yield at the top of that list. That's what makes us money. That's what's going to keep our farms going. So we're going to focus most of this presentation on that yield aspect and how we can use the data from FieldView to see our yields on our farm and make decisions moving forward. The other things on our list are probably going to be pretty varied based on our regions and the specific crops that we do grow. But a lot of that list will probably deal with the agronomic performance of our hybrids and varieties. And some of the things that would be on my list would be the trait systems involved, the early season vigor, and the harvest ease of those hybrids and varieties that we are planting. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each of those factors. So what's the best way to determine the yield potential when there's so many hybrids and varieties coming out each year? Each company kind of overwhelms us with new technology and new products. So it can take a lot to narrow that down to which ones we want to put on our fields. And the best way we can do this using Climate FieldView is to make every field that we have a trial. And it doesn't have to be a seed trial. We can do trials varying our fertilizer rates, either boosting that rate up or dropping it off a little bit for a short section. We can play with our plant populations, whether we increase them or decrease them throughout the fields. Or we can even compare crop protection products by tracking the applications through FieldView. So FieldView is a great tool to record our applications or as applied information, and then compare it side by side with the harvest data after we've harvested that in the fall. So no more need to write your trials or what's going on in a field on the back of your lunch napkin, or stick a flag in a field and try and remember why it's there once harvest rolls around. FieldView is a great data collection and record keeping tool for us in the spring when we're trying a few different things in that seeder or sprayer. So there's a few best practices to keep in mind when we're making every field a trial field. And the first one is to start small. Some of the seeding maps can get pretty crazy, especially on our trial farms, or even at large scale and grower farms where we have 15 hybrid trials out there. You don't need to do anything this complicated. What we really encourage is to start small. This is an example of a canola field where the sales rep gave a grower 2 bags of canola and said, hey, throw this into the middle of your field with your existing hybrid and see how it stacks up. So this is just a quick drone shot. We can see that those couple bags of the new hybrid, they're a little bit darker green in that field. And this is all tracked in FieldView and will be there once we harvest it in the fall. So super easy. It takes 5 minutes to throw those bags in. You can even see here, the grower didn't even clean out the old hybrid as he was changing. So it doesn't have to take hours to do your own trial in your field. A couple other best practices to keep in mind is use multiple years of data when possible. So this year in Western Canada, we have really droughty conditions, almost record-breaking drought. So our yields are going to be pretty low. In Eastern Canada, they had good rainfall, even bordering on excess moisture in some areas. So if we are able to look at multiple years of data, we can really balance out that high and low yields and see what's really going on and get a good overall view of what's happening on our farm operation. So it can be tough when we have new products coming out each year, but if we can make decisions on multiple years of data, that's going to be best for balancing those averages. And just because one hybrid really sticks out in 1 year, don't necessarily go flip your whole farm to that new hybrid in a single year. So use this as a tool, but we still need to think about what the data is telling us and make good risk management decisions for our farm. So we're going to talk about how to analyze yield with FieldView, and I'm going to go through both the white cab app and the black app. So I'm starting with the white cab app, and here we have a side-by-side of a seeding map and the harvest data. And if you click on that arrow that's jumping out of the hamburger menu in the top right-hand corner, and then we're going to select the harvest summary option. And that's going to pull up a nice table for us. Where it says tap to adjust field yield, we can true up our harvested values in there. If our combine isn't quite recording the pounds of crop that have been harvested, if we're using a calibrated weigh wagon or scales before we put the crop into bins, we can true up those numbers, and we can true up the moisture too if our moisture sensors are a little bit off. FieldView will always remember the original numbers that it pulls in, so you can always go back if you make a mistake there. But here in this trial, I have them ranked from highest yielding at the top to lowest yielding at the bottom. And this is just a nice quick way, if we're in the cab, right in the cab app, we can pull up the harvest summary from this field. Now, moving into the black app, when we want to look at yield data, we're going to select the yield analysis tile and click that button that says View More. And the first way we're going to look at trial data is by clicking on the field that we had that trial in. So I'm going to click on the one in the red circle there. And now we can see basically that same data that we just saw in the white cab app, but now we're in the black app. So we have the highest yielding hybrid at the top and the lowest yielding at the bottom. That red arrow is indicating the average yield for that trial field. So it's a really quick visual. You can see which hybrids are higher than average and which ones are below average. If you want
I
to
just
share,
love the way this visualizes it, Kate. As we go through, right, we may not all be growing 10 different hybrids, but even having a few on our farm and understanding some of those differences, it can really have a direct impact on the bottom line at the end of the year. And so I really like the way you've been able to profile this. And I think we're looking at a 10 to 12 bushel difference across this operation here. So.
yeah, and that's great. So it's great that we know what happened at our field. But if you want to get really fancy and share this yield data with your agronomist or maybe your retail, you can click that little box with the arrow jumping out of it in the top right-hand corner. And we can use that to either text or email a PDF of this yield data to anyone we want with that feature. So it's really easy for us to look at, and it's also really easy for us to share.
I think this is nice as well. Then you brought up the looking at multiple years of data, or just because one variety, one in a trial that you have, doesn't mean next year we should be switching all of our acres into that one. This will really help visualize after we get 2 or 3 years of data as well. You can really dive down into and see, is it a consistent performer? Is it one that performs better in drier years or wetter years, or different types of soil as well? Because we know each one of our fields, and if you can look at it at a field by field or a product by product basis.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm going to show next, is how to view things on a product by product basis. So if we go back to the last screen on the iPad, and instead of clicking on that field we want to look at, we can click on where it says varieties, and that will pull up all the hybrids or varieties for that given crop in a year. So this is where we can start to see general trends of hybrids and how they performed across our whole farm. But like you said, it's really important to know the background information and what was really going on the farm. So if that top yielding hybrid was on the first seeded field, caught a few extra rains, low disease pressure, and just yielded outstanding, maybe that's why it's at the top. So it's like I said, this is good to see general trends, but you do have to know what's going on in your fields. And we can use both the field health imagery and boots on the ground to really dive in and see what's going on our farming operation. So this is just another way to look at your data in the Black app. So now that we know how to find our yield data in both the white and black apps, we're going to find out how to turn that data into dollars, and what does this really mean for our bottom line. So we're going to use this example from a corn trial from Eastern Canada to really show what yield data can tell us. So in this trial, the grower saw a difference of 42.6 bushels an acre between that highest yielding hybrid and that lowest yielding hybrid in the trial. So if you think, okay, corn is $6.50 a bushel, well, that's $277 an acre between the top yielding hybrid and that bottom yielding one, which is pretty huge. And, I don't know if there's a maturity going on or what's going on in this field, but even if at half that yield difference, say 21 bushels, across 500 acres, that's still $69,000 of difference between growing that top yielding hybrid and that bottom yielding hybrid. So really sitting down and digging into the data can really put a lot of money in our pockets if we are choosing those correct hybrids for our farm.
Yeah, I was awestruck when I first saw this data, Kate. And I know there's over 40 bushels of difference, top to bottom. But if you even take half that amount, it's a significant contribution when you're dealing with say a 21 bushel difference between hybrids, which we know can happen because we may very well be very happy with a little over 200 bushels. But if we knew we could get over 240 or 220, that's where we want to be, always pushing that envelope and always seeing what we can learn and being able to find what's that new top end yield potential. And I think, like you've highlighted here, having a variety of different options to look at every year becomes really important for continuing to move that farm forward. And FieldView is a great tool to bring all that data in one place and make it simple and easy to analyze.
Mhm.
This brings up a great point on, we've got a lot of varieties out there to choose from, whether we're looking at cereals, pulses, oil seeds, corn, anything like this. We have so many choices that we have, and what's on the top of the list for one farm might be at the bottom of the list for the next farm. So really understanding and trying these varieties out is the right way to go, because we have so many farmers asking us a question: what's the best variety? Which one should I grow? Each farm could be a little bit different depending on the way that they fertilize it, the type of soil that they have, when they typically seed, their whole operation. So great visual here, great example.
Yep. Yeah. And it all goes back to making every field a trial field. No matter if it's just 2 hybrids in there or if it's 15, we can always pull out some sort of difference in there and see what works best on our farm. So now that I've talked about yields, I'm going to move on to evaluating the agronomic performance with the tools that FieldView has to offer. So I'm going to talk about trait systems, early season vigor, and harvest ease, with a few examples that I've seen over the last year or so with my FieldView experience. So I'm going to start off with trait systems. And this is the canola trial that I showed the yield data for earlier. And we had both TrueFlex canola, which is Roundup traded, and Liberty Link canola in there. And I noticed both of the Liberty hybrids seem to be at the bottom of this yield list. And I was a little bit surprised because the 82SC hybrid was doing quite well in our other trials that year. So I figured, well, why are these hybrids, these Liberty, both grouped together at the bottom so much lower than everything else? And I thought back and I looked at my pins, and I remembered that there was large patches of Canada thistle throughout this field. And where we sprayed Roundup on the TrueFlex canola, it really knocked that thistle back and held it back, so there was less weed competition. Where we sprayed Liberty on the Liberty canola, it just kind of burnt the tops of those thistles off, and there was significant weed competition in those hybrids. So obviously the best thing that this grower can do is start to control that Canada thistle in the fall. But if he doesn't get it under control this year, the next time canola pops up in his rotation for this field, it looks like it's going to be a better option to choose a TrueFlex or a Roundup trait system canola for this field. Just based on the weed spectrum in that field, it seems to be a better option and allow that crop to be more competitive with the weeds that we do have in that field. So that's for herbicide trait. We can also start to look at insect traits and the differences that we can see in something like a corn. Using field health imagery, we should be able to pick up some biomass differences if traits are protecting the hybrids better against the insect pressure. So something like a Smart Stack or Tricepta would better protect that corn plant from maybe a VT Double Pro against certain insects that we do see in our fields in Eastern Canada. So using both field health imagery, using yield data, we can start to pull out differences between trait systems in our seed choices.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? And we see a lot of effort goes into those decisions around hybrids here, especially around corn, where there's a lot of different options for both above ground and below ground insects. And if we look at more well-drained soils, sandier soils, we tend to see certain insects overwinter better, and so as a result, we certainly want to put some focus on that, and likely it's going to turn into some yield benefit. But of course, there's always more to the story, and it's an important part of evaluating that crop throughout the whole growing season, like you say, using field health imagery, adequately scouting, and making sure that we're earmarking perhaps some of those challenges that are there as well. So we've always got them checked, and we are going beyond yield for certainly evaluating that seed decision, right? So.
Yep, and I have a great example of that is when I talk about early season vigor. So on June 13th this year, I picked up this field health imagery from one of my canola trials, and I noticed that the bottom two hybrids seem to have a lot lower biomass, as indicated by that red area on the field health imagery. And so I thought, what's going on out there? And when I went out the next day to ground truth it, I took pictures and pinned them to the fields, and I noticed in the low biomass areas, in those red areas, the plants were a lot smaller and there was a lot less ground cover. So those are the canola on the left, and on the right, that's a picture from one of those higher biomass areas where it was a darker green color. And what this field health imagery told me is that the canola on the left, this jumped out of the ground better, put on more biomass, and as a result, it was covering ground faster. It was better competing with weeds for resources since it was able to cover that ground and capture that sunlight and those nutrient and water resources. And in drought years like this, by covering the ground, it probably helps slow the evaporation of some of that groundwater too, which was a big factor. So this is still in the ground right now. We haven't harvested it, but assuming the yields are similar between hybrids, I'm definitely going to choose a seed hybrid that has great early emergence and really covers that ground quicker. So I'll think yield is obviously going to be a factor, but I think we're off to a good start with this one that jumped out of the ground earlier. So.
That's an excellent example there, Kate. And I think you actually have more pins dropped on this field than my grade 5 classroom's bulletin board. But, it looks like you've got a reason for all of it, and you've got all your data in one place here, which I think is just awesome.
Yeah, that pin feature is super handy. I challenged myself and my colleagues that I work with that every time we go visit a field this year, we're going to drop at least one pin. So we try to color code it by date, but we ran out of colors because we visited them so many times. So it's a great feature just for this record keeping. And, that was a month and a half ago, and I can still pull up these examples and they're all dated, and it works perfect for examples like this. So.
Awesome.
This relates to the number 2 when you asked to write down the 3 traits that we're looking for in a hybrid. This relates to number 2 for me, and it's about maturity. Mm-hmm. I see those varieties with the lower biomass, the bottom ones. They're probably going to be a little bit later to the party, and I would bet that your top varieties are gonna probably come to maturity faster or be ready to swath earlier. So, great thing to look for. It's not just a decision that we make at the end of the year. Well, it is a decision we make at the end of the year, but we look at it throughout the entire season and evaluate that plant. So really like your story and your perspective on this one, Kate.
Yeah. So I'll move on to the last example I have here for agronomic performance. And usually when we talk about harvest, we talk about yield. But I wanted to show another thing that we can capture with FieldView, and that's combine speed. And when I think about combine speed, I think about, okay, if I'm able to combine faster through the field, I can cover more acres in the day. And if the yields are high, I can harvest more bushels in a day. And if I'm harvesting more bushels, that probably means the crop's going through the combine quite a bit easier. So I have maybe less wear and tear on my equipment. So I have this example. I'm going back to that canola field that I've showed a few times here. And I wanted to point out this strip with the red arrows. It's this blue strip, this hybrid. It was a top 3 yielder from that yield data. And this green color on the combine speed is about a mile an hour faster harvest speed than those strips that are predominantly blue. So top 3 yielder, my combine's going through that faster. That sounds pretty good to me. I'm getting yield, and I can cover a lot of acres of this hybrid in one day. So we can look at other features from that combine besides yield. It also will show harvest moisture. We can look at elevations to see if there's high and low spots in the field. But it's always worth going in and seeing what else that combine is telling us besides just yield information.
No, that's excellent. And I think we've all heard stories of, oh, I can't stand combining this variety or this hybrid. And I think having the data then to analyze through that at the end of the year and saying, was it worth it? What was there enough incremental yield? Or maybe there is another way, and I had actually forgotten about that hybrid that actually performed really well there at harvest and was easy to combine. That's maybe where we need to scale some of our acres up to, right? I think that's a great point you make there, Kate.
And even to ladder onto that, when we are harvesting these trials or we're swathing them, if we're in a situation where we're swathing, like I said, whether it's a cereal or a canola variety or a corn, when we are going through that, drop a pin when you're doing it and talk about your experience. You can do your voice to text, and even just rank it for, which one harvested the easiest, or even put them into 3 buckets. And then when you can go back and look at that trial that you've done and pull up those pins and take those references that we've had. That's it's a great option.
Okay, so now we've seen how FieldView can help us make seed decisions by analyzing both the yield and the agronomic performance of our hybrids that we are trialing on our farms. So with this, I think we're in great shape for the fall once we get harvests done and we're ready to book our seed for next year.
Well, Kate, we really want to thank you for taking the time. We've got dealers and farmers on the line here today who are very interested in getting more out of FieldView, and I think you've really shown how we can really put that emphasis on that seed decision and the components in FieldView that really help make that easy, and also give some good guidance for how best to think about these things on the whole scale of our operation. And so thanks a lot for all of that insight. And I think we all took a lot out of this here today and saw lots of opportunities from an expert like yourself. So with that concludes this week's webinar. As always, it will be hosted on climatefieldview.ca/webinars. And we thank you for attending, and we look forward to what can hopefully be a successful harvest season here shortly. And thank you for watching here today.
Thanks a lot. Farm safe.